He floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee, dazzling the world with his speed and power. He also captivated us with his words, insulting his opponents, lauding himself with bravado and wit. But why, more than 30 years after hanging up his gloves, does Muhammad Ali, who's died at the age of 74, still retain almost mythical status? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Martine Dennis. Now, he was one of the most celebrated sportsmen of the 20th century, the only boxer ever to win the world heavyweight titles 3 times. But his global standing derives as much from his work outside the ring as much as inside it. He called himself the greatest, and the world agreed. After a legendary boxing career of 20 years, Muhammad Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in the mid-1980s. Despite the increasingly aggressive neurological disease, he continued to devote much of his time to philanthropy, raising millions of dollars for charity and inspiring entire communities. He travelled the world in support of the downtrodden, gaining their admiration and of world leaders alike. But he lost the ability to speak as his illness got steadily worse. The frequency of his hospital stays increased recently, and he died in hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, at the age of 74. Well, Ali first electrified his fans with both his verbal and physical sparring in the 1960s. During his career, he won 56 of 61 fights with 37 knockouts. His iconic fights include the Rumble in the Jungle in what was then Zaire. Beating George Foreman was one of the biggest sporting upsets ever seen. The Thriller in Manila in 1975 was the third and final fight with his great rival Joe Frazier. Commentators described the 14 rounds of brutal punching as the greatest world title fight of all. One of Ali's most controversial fights was against the US government when he refused to become a soldier and fight in the Vietnam War. He had his boxing license suspended for his defiance. And he appalled many Americans by converting to Islam and changing his name from Cassius Clay. Throughout his life, Muhammad Ali tirelessly promoted his Islamic faith. Right, let's introduce our guests. In London, we have Chris Eubank. He's a former middleweight world champion. In Paris, we have Michael Kirtley, an international feature writer and a friend of Muhammad Ali. In Oakland, California, we're joined by Marc Spears, a sports writer. Let's start with you, Chris, in London. On receiving the news of Muhammad Ali's demise, you tweeted that he was your idol. What was it about him that inspired you?
The fact that he was a maverick and that he believed he can do anything and did it. And with his flair, with his charisma, with his ability to fight, or his integrity, which he would have had to have to be able to fight, that obviously impregnated my subconscious. And most certainly as a young boy, I wanted to do the shovel. I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be respected. And so everything that he embodied, in fact, makes me today the person who I have become. I've become a world champion because of Muhammad Ali. I mean, effectively, he was my foundation.
So it's Muhammad Ali and his shuffle that actually inspired you to get into the ring. How would you describe boxing then? What sort of impact did taking up boxing have on your life? I know that you'd had a pretty, shall we say, dodgy school career in London, and you'd gone to the United States to iron you out to New York. And taking up boxing, what did that mean for your life?
Boxing taught me to be calm, gentle and true. The first lesson I was taught was this. The trainer said to me, if we teach you this craft and this art, you can never use it outside the ring. You can only use it to protect people. Reason becomes your only weapon. Reason obeys itself. And so with this conduct and this behavior that boxing taught me, it's made me a citizen who contributes towards my community and doesn't cost it, which is why it's a fantastic tool for youngsters in any community. And Muhammad Ali inspired that. You know, he looked after the community. He was me, we. You know, he was a person who amalgamated and made harmony within the communities and gave the working class hope. Boxing is the working man's sport. They say race horses and racing with horses is a sport of kings, and boxing is the king of sports, and Muhammad Ali made it so. And I am privileged. I'm privileged to be here speaking on behalf of the man who kind of molded me.
All right. Thank you for that, Chris. Now, Michael, in Paris, you knew the man personally, and you've just heard the kind of inspiration that he gave to Chris. He was a great exponent, wasn't he, in his later years, a great exponent of justice, of looking out for the dispossessed, the marginalised.
I think that, I first of all echo everything that Chris said, but I think that what the inspiration that Ali was to him, I saw I'm a journalist. I travel around the world. I've been among nomads, pygmies, other indigenous people. Everywhere I would go, if people found out that I was a friend of Muhammad Ali, they would flock to me and ask about him. I've never been in any part of the world where Ali has not influenced the lives of the people there. As an inspiration, first of all, I think that coming from Kentucky myself, I grew up certainly learning and hearing about Ali as he grew up as a young boxer and was involved in Golden Gloves boxing in Louisville, and then became an Olympic champion, and then became a heavyweight champion. And during that entire time, he was very controversial in some respects, and I think you had people that would go to see Ali both for and against him, but there was no one that could not notice him. And so as he grew older in life and as he became a champion, and then later after he retired, that's at the point where I started to know him. And what I learned about Ali, I never forget the first time I met him. It was in his home in Louisville. I met him one-on-one. He asked me over for a visit, and he started doing magic tricks, probably just to sort of break the ice. And then we sat down, and he talked to me about Africa, because I'd just come back from Africa. And he said, do you know somebody in Africa that we can call, somebody that would like to hear my voice? He didn't ask to talk to a president. He didn't ask to talk to a business person. He just said anybody. And I said, I know a secretary that has heard me talk about Ali. And he said, well, let's call that secretary. So we did. We called their secretary in the Ivory Coast, who was totally flabbergasted, of course. But Ali felt he was so warm to this person on the phone in Africa that he was talking to. And I would say that mirrors everything that I've known about him. I've spent hours and hours and hours with Ali. We've gone on walks together. We've had adventures together. And at every point, I can say that he's probably one of the most humble and gracious people that I've ever met in my life.
Well, that's really interesting, Michael.
And I think that's really one of the things.
But that's really interesting that you say that, Michael, because of course, in his early days, he was also considered to be a bit of a loudmouth, very conceited, and incredibly abusive towards his opponents. So he obviously changed.
Well, he was a boxer. He had to be abusive towards his opponents. You don't box to lose. But in terms of his vociferous nature, he would tell me afterwards that it was kind of a game. He wanted to get into the minds of the people there. Now, he certainly had lots of confidence in his ability. He always had confidence. At every point that I knew him, he had confidence. And I think that in that sense, I knew his mother quite well as well, Odessa Clay. I knew his brother, Rahman Clay, and Rahman Ali. And what I noticed is that Ali was always, at that particular point, confident in anything he did, but he wasn't vain and he wasn't boastful about it.
Okay.
He would do things because he wanted to do them.
Okay, and let's go to Marc. Hold on a minute, Michael, because I want to go to Marc now in Oakland, California.
Go ahead.
I mean, Marc, you've described your encounter. You're a sports journalist, we must point out, and you've described your encounter with Muhammad Ali almost in religious terms.
Well, I mean, growing up with a dad who's a year younger than Muhammad Ali and idolized. My dad wasn't a huge sports fan or isn't a huge sports fan, but the one person he followed religiously was Muhammad Ali. I remember as a child, the fights coming on ABC, and I would sit on the carpet and watch it with my father. That was something that he did and we did together, and I think it was a part of black lore. If he was fighting on a Saturday, we stopped what we were doing to watch it. And, you know, he was bigger than anybody but Jesus Christ.
I thought it was quite interesting what Chris said. Chris said that one of the great draws of Muhammad Ali was the fact that he was a black man swimming against the tide, was the phrase, I think. He was a maverick, said Chris. I mean, was this something that drew the black community in the United States, particularly to the man, at a time, of course, particularly when there weren't equal rights for black Americans?
Well, you know, he was somebody in the civil rights movement, you know, somebody that didn't go to Vietnam, somebody who was oppressed, somebody that was, you know, seen as against the United States. And now, years later, he's revered by everybody. He was the most well-known figure in the world. Things changed, and he you know, didn't walk away from his convictions. And so I think a lot of black America, a lot of the world found strength in somebody that was so strong and not only fought in the ring, but fought for what he believed in outside the ring.
And Chris, how far, I know that you're different weights, of course, he was a heavyweight and you're a middleweight, but how far did his actual boxing style, he's obviously was a very quick boxer with exceptionally good reflexes, so how far did that influence the way you actually boxed?
Well, I mean, you know, the very famous quote, float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. I mean, I was in barbershops as an 11-year-old listening to the barbers speak about Muhammad Ali and how infused they were about his style and who would win, him against Norton, him against George Foreman. So, you know, the vibrance he created, over and above his boxing ability, he inspired the working class. And me being a kid, I got it. I wanted to do something. I wanted to be something. I wanted to aspire. I wanted to be a person who could entice, engage a public. You know, there's a quotation that says like this, and it's a Mandela quote. In fact, it was his inaugural speech. And I won't say all of it, there's a part of it that's important. It says that the world cannot be served by your playing small. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking, so others around you won't feel insecure. We were born to make manifest the glory of God which is within us. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously allow others to do the same. And in liberating ourselves from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others.
All right, so what did that mean for you then?
It impregnated my subconscious. You know, it made me want to do something, to dare. It made me want to dare. It made me want to take risk. It made me want respect. It made me want to be a better person. And because of him, I today have become someone, as I said before, who contributes towards my community at large. You know, he's inspired me to stand up against the war in Iraq. And I did at the time in 2003, got arrested.
Yes,
outside Downing Street with my. Can I just go on to say?
Go on.
Rather than talk about that, he's inspired me, and I've actually used him as the shoulders, the giant. I stood on the giant shoulders of Muhammad Ali in order to actually do something for the community at large. And I would add this at this point: it would be a wonderful thing if David Cameron I would use my own money to have a statue built in Hyde Park.
All
and
right.
should be done also. This should be done around the world in tribute to this man who lit a flame in all of us.
We shall see.
It should be done in the Emirates. It should be done in Paris.
We shall
it should
see,
be done
Chris.
in New York
all
City.
Right, all right. But Michael,
okay.
you referenced a little bit earlier about America's reaction to him, and I'm particularly interested in the moment at which he announced his conversion to Islam, announced his membership of the Nation of Islam. How concerned was America by that? Because in so doing, of course, he'd taken himself out of mainstream civil rights, if you like, and had firmly placed himself in the camp of Elijah Muhammad.
Well, let's say that, first of all, for me, this is a very sad day, of course, because he was a friend. But to echo what Chris was saying, I think it's I believe that all of the flags around the world should be held at half-mast today, because we have lost one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. And I think that when he turned to Islam, of course, that was very close to the beginning of his boxing career, he was known as a very brash, he was very known as a very controversial figure even at that time, because every time he would fight, even when he was fighting Sonny Liston and before, he would have jingles. He was sort of the inventor of rap before rap existed. When he turned to Islam, again, I was in Kentucky at that time, and I remember the reactions of people around me who were very mystified. Islam at that time wasn't exactly considered the same way that it is today in many parts of America. It was much less of a present-day concern of people. He was the first of many sports figures to turn to Islam. He was inspired by Malcolm X. He was inspired by Elijah Muhammad. And so when he turned to Islam, I think people were put off, yes, because he turned away from Christianity. They were put off because he changed his name. Many people refused to use his new name. They continued, even sports writers, and even on the television, they would continue to call them Cassius Clay. There was a very famous sports announcer on NBC called Howard Cosell, who accepted to call him Muhammad Ali, and I think that at that point that gave credence to this conversion. But I think people at that time saw it as maybe whimsical to a certain degree. They didn't know they didn't know enough about Ali at that particular point. Over time, however, I think that there is no figure in American history from that period that made Islam more acceptable to more people, because Muhammad Ali became a beloved figure. And just like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar later and many other sports figures later that turned to Islam, I think Muhammad Ali paved the way at that particular moment for a kind of acceptance that, at least in the African American community, that it was something that was a normal process, but it took time.
Okay. Mark, Muhammad Ali stopped boxing. He retired from boxing, what, 30 years ago. What was it, do you think, that gave him his enduring appeal? Because he's as popular, or perhaps even more so, today than he was then.
Well, I mean, he was in cartoons, he was in movies, he was on cereal boxes, he was saw all over the world. And, you know, before there was a big cable, before there was the internet, before all that, you know, you always saw him all over the world. And I thought it was actually super brilliant for him to fight in Manila, for him to fight in Africa, for him to fight in all these different countries. He knew how to promote himself long before Twitter, long before Instagram, better than anybody. He was entertaining. He was funny. He invented rap. I'll give him that. He was controversial. He stood for what he believed in. And I remember when he was named the athlete of the century in Kentucky, I was there. And I remember when he showed up, just a hush went over the crowd as he walked in, and his wife, Miss Lonnie, walked him through, and it was like a parting of the Red Sea as he walked through. And the one thing that struck to me was his kindness as well. After the event, he signed autographs for like an hour. I left. I had forgotten my glasses. I came back about 45 minutes to an hour later, and he was still signing autographs for the help of the hotel. So to him, it didn't matter if you were there for the event, if you were there, somebody there washing dishes. He treated everybody the same. He treated them with respect. He made time for you, and he made every person feel special. And I don't know if there's ever been a star like that who would make everybody individually feel like they matter.
And Chris, it sounds very much as though Muhammad Ali has got a unique place in not just in your life, but in the life of a whole generation.
Many generations, if you look at the world we live in. Muhammad Ali has at one point his name was it was bigger than Coca-Cola. It was bigger than Yes. He's been bigger than presidents. So this sportsman, and I am honored to call myself a boxer, and the fact that he inspired me to want to become a boxer, and that I can look up at his brilliance, at the spirit of the man. I'm in a very privileged position, and even here today to be here speaking to you on this panel, this going out around the Middle East, it's I was very lucky to actually feel him resonate, that he resonated towards me as a child. So I'm very privileged.
Is it fair to say that he changed your life, Chris?
Oh, most certainly, most certainly. Boxing, you see, is something that actually it makes you whole. A little while ago, someone was talking about his attitude in the ring, how coarse he may have been, but then that's ringmanship. It's the foundation he used boxing for in order to get across the human being that we all should be. And today I'm inspired by him. And again, I had the good luck to see that I should try and stand, metaphorically speaking, on the shoulders of a giant that Muhammad Ali was.
Michael, can I give the last word to you? And if you could make it quite brief, please. What will you miss about your friend, Muhammad Ali?
What I will miss most about Ali is his spontaneity. A little example. One day, he calls me up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He says, Michael, I want to come to dinner at your place, but I don't want to meet any of the adults in your city. I don't want anybody to know, but I want all the children of Bardstown, Kentucky, my town was about 5,000 people, to come and meet me. 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he was coming at 5. What do? I go out and I solicit 3 or 4 kids on bicycles. I tell them, go around the city and tell all the kids to come to my front yard. Within a few hours, we had 300 kids in the yard, spilling out into the street, and then Ali shows up in his Winnebago. He stands out in the yard for 2 hours, talking to the kids, signing their autographs, feeling totally comfortable. That's what he was. That was his element. Then the mayor of the city comes up and says, I want to offer you the key to the city. And he says, Mr. Mayor, I didn't come to get the key to the city. I came to meet the children. That's the Ali that I will remember.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all our guests, Chris Eubank, Michael Kirtley and Marc Spears. Thank you all very much indeed. And as ever, thank you for watching. We leave you now with some of Muhammad Ali's own words.
Yeah, I made up a good poem, a little short poem. I said, last night I had a dream. When I got to Africa, I had one hell of a rumble. I had to beat Tarzan's behind first for claiming to be the king in the jungle. For this fight, I've wrestled with alligators. I've tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning and put thunder in jail. You know I'm bad. I have murdered a rock. I injured a stone, and I hospitalized a brick. I'm so bad I make medicine sick. I'm so fast, man, I can run through a hurricane and don't get wet. When George Foreman meets me, he'll pay his debt. I can drown a drink of water and kill a dead tree. Wait till you see Muhammad Ali.